Where to begin this long tale? It's an interesting one. It's a family history. It's our family history. It started 5 generations ago. 5 generations ago in what in those days was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but today is in today is in the Czech Republic. It started with my great-grandfather in 1855, roughly 165 years ago. And he set the roots of the Jelinek Cork Group. How did this all happen? It's interesting. Bohemia and Moravia were the provinces where he grew up. He actually lived in Moravia as a young lad. And that area of the world, even in those days, was considered one of the best places for the production of beer. His father, so my great-great-grandfather, was a beer drinker. He was a farmer, and at nights around the dinner table he would have beer. And he would send his son, Henry, to the pub each day to bring the beer for that night. And the way it was done was they would provide him with a big jug, and he would carry that jug down the block or 2 blocks or wherever the pub was. And the beer man or bar woman would fill the jug up with beer, and he would then trek it home, often spilling it or even dropping it at one time, I understand. And he would get home, and his father would be quite angry at him for wasting all that beer. On one of these treks back home, he thought to himself, this is quite a primitive way of bringing beer to the consumer, always having to go to a pub to get it. And he thought that he had seen some bottles in the bigger city, which was about 50 miles away at that time, because they were in a small village called Bosonohe. And his thought was this: get some of those bottles, fill them up with beer, plug them up somehow, and then you could have bunches of them stored at home. The problem was, of course, how do you plug them up? In those days, many of the beer barrels were already using cork plugs to hold the beer in the barrels. So he thought of getting some of these cork plugs, which he did from some of the breweries. He bought some, and he cut them down to fit the beer bottles. He had those bottles filled, plugged them up with a cork, and brought them home, maybe 10, 20 bottles at a time, so he wouldn't have to run out every day. And his father was quite impressed, and he felt that he had invented something. It was the entrepreneurial spirit that he had, and that, in fact, has kept our company going for 5 generations. So that was the beginning of Jelinek Cork Group. In 1855, to be exact. Young Henry, at that time, Henry I, would have been about 20 years old. He went to Spain, where he made connections with one of the cork factories and ordered very specific corks for the beer bottles. He imported those to Bohemia and Moravia, where he lived, and got some bottles, ordered some bottles, and got some breweries to really accept this phenomenal thinking that he had of beer distribution. And so it started. Let me tell you that there are now 5 generations of family members within this company of ours, and all of them have a Henry as one of the helms, at one of the helms that leads of the company. It's quite phenomenal, even to myself, you know, but that is what inspired me eventually to write this book, House of Cork. It lays out the whole history of our family, the trials and tribulations that we went through, from the beginnings through the First World War, the Second World War, with the occupation of our country by the Germans, Nazis, and then by the communists. So there were ups and downs, as in all businesses, and we can continue this tale as we move forward.